Yeah, but by my watch, it's 11:30. So again, welcome to BSidesCharm 2025. Thanks to the organizers and volunteers and staff for putting this on this year. My name is Matt Maisel. I've been in cybersecurity for over 14 years, mostly doing applied ML and software engineering at product startups. But my roots are in security operations. Back then, I remember, and this is back then in 2011, I remember experimenting with tools like Honeybee, but never quite having the resources nor buy-in to deploy it widely internally for deception use cases. So today, I'm excited to share some work that aims to change that, cyber deception in Google Cloud, powered by generative traps. So back in April 2015, John Lambert wrote the famous words, "Defenders think in lists, attackers think in graphs. As long as this is true, attackers win." Well, it's 2025, and it's what a year to be alive. And we, the security operations teams, think in graphs now. Mostly we care about graphs of our assets. We inventory them, and we monitor the relationships and the activity between those assets across our environments. We also have help from our tools and our vendors, and they build things in graphs, attack graphs, exposure graphs, supply chain graphs, and so forth. But attackers are still gaining initial footholds, still getting credentials, still escalating privileges, traversing our environments, and achieving their objectives. So if we're a security operations team and we have constituents that have infrastructure and services in Google Cloud or other cloud providers, what can we do now today to try to detect and deter our adversaries? I'm saying we should lie to them. We lie to them about the state of our graphs with things like cyber deception. We sprinkle in fake service accounts, buckets, cloud services like Cloud Run or Cloud Lambda or Cloud Functions or other GCP resources, and then we get the attackers to fall into our traps. Organizations with an assumed breach mentality accept that adversaries will get in, and deception is another layer of defense and depth that we can use in our tool set. So deception introduces uncertainty about the target environment. It increases the probability of detection of adversaries. It acts as sludge to slow them down. And for security operation teams, deception can reinforce the seams in our detection surfaces by placing traps at key choke points along the attacker's attack path. Traps are what we've called as decoys or canaries or honey credentials or honey tokens, depending on the deployment scenario, are meant to detect adversary interaction by imitating an internal target asset. And when there's interactions, we can alert the SOC on that activity, and then from there, perform immediate investigation as a high precision alert, do initial response, or potentially do further monitoring and generate threat intelligence that's custom and bespoke to our environment. But hold up a minute, deception for cybersecurity isn't anything new. Even for internal threat detection use cases with traps, canaries and honey tokens and honeypots have been around for a while. We've had deception tech, arguably publicly, at least since 35 years since the publication of the cuckoo's egg in 1989, where although it wasn't called honeypots, entire departments were created, entire fictitious systems were created to lure in the attacker and ultimately expose them. And in recent years, we have companies like Tracebit and others like Rami McCarthy publishing security canary maturity models that help have organizations have a North Star for taking their unmanaged infrastructure, canary infrastructure, and making it optimal and move towards a mature and optimal state. And of course, there's processes and work by the MITRE Engage group around adversarial engagement, which lays out processes for deception, including scoping, crafting a narrative, deploying deceptive assets, monitoring them, and then doing teardown. And of course, there's hundreds of tools out there on sites like Awesome Honeypot, on GitHub on Awesome Honeypot and Awesome Deception. There's cloud-specific tools like Honeytrail, which is similar to the tool I'm releasing today, that is called CloudTrail, and it uses CloudTrail, I should say, to detect and notify on interactions with S3 or Lambda or DynamoDB. With the rise of transformers, there's now an explosion in research of LLM-based honeypots or active defense frameworks like Gala or GenAI Pod or Velmez. And then for application layer decoys, there's tools like Cloud Active Defense by SAP. And just in the past few weeks, the Dynatrace research team put out it's called Coney. It's a Kubernetes operator that is used for deception policies in Kubernetes clusters. and helps with the deployment of honey tokens and other fake API endpoints to Kubernetes clusters. And finally, if you have the resources, there's around 24 deception vendors, including startups, as well as consolidations over the years, that offer everything from moving target defense to deception as a service. So why isn't deception more prevalent in security operations? At least public examples of this, are difficult to find. There is one recent example for using deception to find a corporate spy, an insider threat. So the Rippling security team signaled to some executives at one of their competitors that, hey, here's this Slack channel that there's some interesting stuff in it potentially. That Slack channel was never known to anyone. It was just created, and it was actually used to expose a corporate spy that was acting in its environment. Now there's a $12 billion lawsuit. So again, it was a significant engagement by the team, but minimal use of resources to ultimately find a corporate spy. But in general, maybe no one talks about it. There are actually several deception talks this weekend at BSidesCharm, so I think that's signs of change, and I encourage you to go check those out. But looking at reports from Gartner, at least right now, they're saying that by 2030, organizations, enterprises are going to be, 75% of organizations will have some form of deception capabilities, and that's up from 10% today. So this is the best number I could find. So if we're at 10% today, there's obviously challenges, and there's obviously a long way to go if we're trying to get more deception in our environments. And I see that mostly attributed to 3 different buckets of pain points. Number one, there's the questionable effectiveness. Is cyber deception effective? Does it actually deter attackers? The data on this is sparse. Like I said, there's been limited examples publicly, but there's actually recent empirical studies by academic and other research groups that show promise. The Dynatrace research team released a tool, and a questionnaire tool called HoneyQuest in 2024, and they had 50 study participants that basically went through an experiment of labeling interesting artifacts as either things they would exploit or things they would avoid. And this was meant to determine what types of traps would be interesting to attackers. And in that study, they found that attackers with traps, it reduced attackers' ability to find true risks in that experiment by 22% on average, and that the humans in the experiment fell for traps about 37% of the time. There was a study back in 2021, the Tularosa study, where a group of 130 red teamers were recruited and basically went wild on a network. Interestingly, in some cases, some of the red teamers were told that deception was active in the environment and others were not. And what was interesting about this is that even when they were aware, the red teamers were aware of deception in the environment, they actually triggered more decoy alerts or more traps versus being uninformed about deception. Also, what was interesting is that every participant ended up triggering a decoy or a trap prior to exploiting one of the targets in the environment. So this again shows that even when announcing deception, we can waste attackers' time, and we can have sludge basically to make them have longer circuitous routes to the crown jewels. And to further enforce that, at least in academic research right now, there's ongoing studies by a group that is trying to understand how the optimal number of traps as a percentage of the network, trying to understand how that may or may not increase the attack path length of attackers. And again, there were some interesting nuggets of more anecdotal evidence of red teamers that were super stressed out when they found out that deception was active in the environment and were concerned about it breaking all their tools, all their workflows. And again, so the evidence right now, at least from these studies, and again, with the limitations of the sort of experiments and the simulations and the environments that they are setting up, is definitely showing positive reinforcement that deception can be effective even if you announce it or not. A second problem that I relate to this is making traps that are indistinguishable from targets. So how difficult is it to detect the use of traps in an environment? We don't want them to be distinguishable from targets. And historically, honeypots have had this reputation of being easily identified with signatures. There's tools like HoneyDet or plenty of nuclei templates to basically have scanners looking for these honeypots out there on the public internet. But at least, and also too, deception vendors actually are not immune from this either. There was a blog post by the Trufflehog group back last year that found that Thinkus Canary's free AWS Canary tokens actually ended up using the same AWS account ID. This was for the free service, so I don't think it was affecting their paid stuff, but again, just like OPSEC stuff here, where even if you're trying to use deception, if you don't do it right, it can be easily signatured. So I think this just highlights the difficulty of crafting realistic deception personas, and just in general, it's manually time intensive, and unless you're creating them pretty frequently and rotating them, they could be signatured given the tools that you're using. And finally, and I think I think has the most impact of this actually is that there's tedious and risky infrastructure that's required to deploy traps to your internal networks, right? Who does the bookkeeping? How do I know I'm not introducing vulnerabilities that the attacker ends up exploiting? What if it disrupts the production workloads? Traps require maintenance just like any other infrastructure to avoid the unnecessary risk. And I think historically, as put by Lance Spitzer, the founder of the HoneyNet project back in 2019, that it wasn't the concept of deception, but it's been the technology. And I think that's even more true today now in cloud environments. And deception in cloud environments specifically can sidestep many of these issues, I think. We have infrastructure tooling like Terraform for Cloud Development Kit or Pulumi, which is what I use today. And with these programmatic infrastructure as code tools, we can deploy resources to the cloud and make them fully provisioned, fully functional, making them harder to distinguish. We can also leverage the serverless technology, like serverless traps, things like Lambda or Cloud Functions, where we can deploy traps and they can scale to zero and only incur costs whenever attackers are actually interacting with them. And finally with infrastructure at least, with these tools you can set it up so that they have the same infrastructure lifecycle as real production resources, so that the maintenance overhead of the trap is tied to the same lifecycle as the production resources that they're trying to mimic. And finally, right, with the explosion of generative AI, there's absolutely the potential use of LLMs to help automate traps with using production resource naming conventions, tags and other metadata that's out there, and even potentially data to help create more realistic traps for the environment. So that's why today, this weekend, I'm releasing a tool I'm calling Poltergeist, and I'm releasing this to help hopefully allow security operation and security engineering teams experiment with cyber deception in their environment, specifically as of today, GCP. Poltergeist is a cyber deception tool that helps with the generation, orchestration, and monitoring of cloud-native traps that lure and detect attackers. I've built it in Go and recently as an open source tool under the MIT license today. And yeah, there's three things that it does. It helps generate tailored, believable traps. So trap personas are generated with large language models with in-context learning, where there's samples that are pulled in, imported from your environment to basically create traps that have similar naming conventions to make them more believable and more enticing. And it can use reasoning models or other techniques to help improve trap quality with things like LLM as a judge to effectively assess the trap enticingness or believability. The second thing Poltergeist does is helps with the orchestration of this. So the Pulumi automation API is used to plan and apply infrastructure against your cloud provider, against GCP. And then it sets up interactions. Whenever there's any interactions with any of the trap resources, it sets up logging with a router to set up a cloud logging to have any emitted activity sent to another GCP project for the security team to look at. And then finally, sort of on the akin to MITRE Engage, it pulls from their playbook of basically helping manage deception engagements. It does this through the orchestration of the engagements by grouping traps that have similar targets, and this is done with stratagems. And stratagems are template playbooks for trap use cases in Poltergeist that describe the trap, where they're placed in the attack path, and what they're masquerading as to the attacker. As I said, right now the coverage is limited to the GCP, but the architecture of Poltergeist and the ideas here could clearly extend to AWS and Azure as well too. So let's just take a look at a few examples of these stratagems. The first one I'm calling follow the yellow brick road. Right, security engineers are making paved roads for our developers, so we should be building yellow brick roads for the adversaries. They don't know that the Wiz is a lie and that Oz is not what it seems. And this is just all about detecting lateral movement by baiting attackers with tempting IAM relationships, so service accounts that can be impersonated by other principals in GCP, and it is basically planted then as credentials to lead to other traps in the environment. The second stratagem I'm calling save your pets, shoot your cattle, watch your canaries. And this is deploying decoy compute resources like VMs or Cloud Run or Cloud Functions that mimic real services with tempting but potentially contained vulnerabilities. And this is meant to help detect exploitation or persistence attempts by adversaries. A third stratagem is called Crown Jewel Gravity Well. And this is just using decoy storage like buckets, like GCS buckets that are filled with enticing synthetic data that's meant to detect data discovery and exfiltration. And then finally, if the stratagems are sort of all combined together, there's Enter My Cloud Labyrinth, which is basically an entire GCP project where everything in it is a trap resource, and it's perfect for enticing threat intelligence and yeah, potentially generating your own threat intelligence for your organization. So what does this look like? I'm just going to run a demo because I did not want to tempt the demo gods today. But Poltergeist, the binary has two commands right now. It's one to basically deploy and one to destroy. Currently, it requires you to have GCP credentials that can import through Pulumi, import resources or import the stack from Pulumi to basically load up the target resources, and then a secondary project, access to a secondary project in GCP that's set up for, again, the logging of interactions with the traps, as well as use Gemini, which is the models that I use right now for trap generation. So this is kind of happening quite fast, but at one point there was a scroll by of two stratagems that sampled target resources and then generated several service accounts, traps, as well as a bucket. And the rest of this is basically just Pulumi automation going through, refreshing the trap stack, going and provisioning the resources, and then configuring cloud logging routers that have filters specifically on the trap resources by different identifiers. And this is what set up all the logging to go from the target projects to the Poltergeist project where the security team is looking at this. So now that all these trap resources are deployed to a project, let's pretend we're an attacker that may have found, maybe we got on some engineer's device and we have credentials now. So we're just going to go and list a particular bucket. We're going to go get an object from that bucket. And then also maybe we found a service account and we're just going to go print the access token after impersonating one of these service accounts, right? So this is that's the screen that was showing those commands. And right now we're just waiting. And this is, again, cloud logging. And just there we see one of the traps of activities was logged. Through cloud logging, we have useful metadata around what actual resource was used, IP address, and other metadata about the requester, and then who is the actual principal that made that request. And then as well too, we can see finally the actual it already came, the actual call to get the access token for the account. So that's just a demo of just showing how quickly interactions can then be generating alerts or other logs for use in investigation or response. So yeah, so how does this all work? This is just a diagram of the Poltergeist components. This is an architecture inspired again by Dynatrace research, which by now I think, throughout the talk they published some great papers. They have some great work around deception. There's a framework they put out a couple years back that kind of formulates the use of deception modules in the cloud, specifically trying to inject them into different resources and build up these graphs of multiple cyber attacks that could alert on multiple multi-step cyber attacks with traps. And what's happening with Poltergeist, at least with this implementation today, is that it creates a Pulumi provisioner that again attaches to the target stack, which is just a standard Pulumi project and stack. Those resources, that state file is exported and then imported and constructs a resource graph in Pulumi, which then, given the stratagems that Pulumi takes as input, the stratagems guide trap generation, again, using Gemini currently right now, but it could be set up with any LLM provider or even Olama. Those are set up in a way to create the traps and then add those traps back to the resource graph alongside the other target resources. And then finally, that is then deployed by Pulumi back to GCP. So that's the architecture. So where do we go from here? There's multiple directions I think that could be worked on. One, there's an idea around where optimal trap placement is. So it's pretty naive at the moment right now. These are there's just static logic that says, hey, go deploy this trap and set it up so that principals can impersonate it. But given the resource graph, we could be more intelligent. We could try to maximize discoverability by looking at inbound edges or traversals to traps. And then also, too, we obviously want to minimize exposure to production resources. And right now, that's just done by hard constraints. Thank you. So second, benchmark evaluations. Benchmark evaluations are needed to more empirically measure the effectiveness of generated traps versus manual traps. So I don't have any numbers right now on like, are the traps generated by Gemini or other models, are they better in, along the lines of discoverability, indistinguishability, or deployability at this point? So I think that's one area of research. And this is where the use of, again, potentially Honeyquest come into play, where some of the trap generation can be done without having to implement that in Plumi, and I think it would be pretty easy to hook up LLMs as a judge or agents to basically be like the humans in the study that they had at the time. I think that would be an interesting research direction. And then finally, the final area of direction I think right now is implementing more stratagems. I only have a couple of these stratagems implemented today in code. And then, of course, getting more coverage for different cloud providers like Kubernetes, Amazon, and Azure. So it's 2025, and now with deception tools like Poltergeist, everyone thinks in graphs, defenders think in game theory, and attackers win, or did they? If you work in SecOps or security engineering and you have constituents and environments in the cloud that you're responsible for, I hope you'll check out Poltergeist. It's up on GitHub today. And if it helps build out your internal dissection capabilities, let me know. Beyond that, thank you for your time today. I'm happy to take questions now, or please come find me. I'll be here the rest of the day. Thank you very much. You, sir.
So when one of these is deployed, how would I annotate that, or how would I allow the rest of my organization, a new DevOps, DevSecOps engineer, needs to know that that thing is there now. When it doesn't generate it, there needs to be something saying, don't worry about this. This is not your.
Yeah, so OPSEC around these traps. I think, sorry. Thank you, sir. The question is, if you deploy these traps, how do you annotate them in a way that you can tell your DevOps team or other stakeholders that they're out there and that they basically don't like trigger false positive, or at least they don't worry about like what is this thing? I think I guess maybe I didn't probably demo it well enough with the scrolling, but like this right now uses the Plumi cloud, so that trap stack is added up. So if you have, obviously ACL around your Plumi, and whoever can go and inspect to see what projects and what stacks are deployed, there would be a way to clearly see like, hey, here's the stack of traps that are deployed relevant to this project. And I think that would be one way to get access to that without having to announce it or have like other things that could be potentially signatured with like tags or other things in GCP. Question?
Full artifacts or offsite log activities from the trap that generates.
So the question is, what SOAR activities, what sort of automated response activities would be in the tool, or potentially could be done when there's an alert from one of the traps? I currently have that, at least in the tool right now, not implemented whatsoever. But I think, yeah, that's where, depending on your organization, what your policies are, what your playbooks are for that, if you have a SOAR, if you have your own sort of playbook automation, I think it would be interesting to like basically probably monitor more than like do an immediate response. There's an idea where if you can have correlations of trap alerts that span one or more traps, right, like that attack path is obviously indicating that there's someone actively traversing and operating in your network, and I feel like that provides a higher degree of fidelity that there's something really bad happening. So again, yeah, I think there's a couple different ways you could take that, but there's no automation built into the tool currently. But I imagine with things like now there's like TraceCat and like other tools out there are pretty cool with automating playbooks. Would be interesting to follow up on that. Go ahead. So the question is how, yeah, we don't want another tool to log into as analysts. We don't want another single pane of glass. Yeah, for like trap alerts, so this is all goes to cloud logging. I think it's a very simple step to go from there into whatever SIEM or security data lake or to whatever tool you're using for looking at alerts. So I would expect that to be the place where all the alerts coming from traps, are correlated, and you don't have to, you can use them in your normal workflow for like triage, alert triage and stuff. You could leverage that.
Okay. So there's not like a guide on there. You would just basically have to set up forwarding the cloud logs to your.
Correct, yeah. Cool. Looks like there's no more time left, but please, if you're interested about deception, come find me. Again, thank you very much.